Gentleman with the yellow shirt.
Jerry Natal, West Long Beach, New Jersey, Secretary of New Jersey Outgoing Lines. Two things. Number one, I want to thank you for signing the vote for the bill and your management bill. The other thing about the school education, is there anything, any part of the reform of reducing the 600-plus school districts?
Here's my view on reducing school districts. We're now below 600. I'm not taking a bow for that, but we're below 600. All too often, what government has tried to do is to impose a solution from above, from Trenton, and say, these towns should consolidate, these school districts should consolidate. And I have to tell you the truth, and I think Rochelle would probably agree with this, Commissioner. I'm edgy about letting Trenton make those decisions from that many miles away. So here's what we've tried to do to encourage that kind of choice to be made. We now have a 2% hard property tax cap that comes into effect on January 1st. That is going to force, and the only way, by the way, we exceed that cap is not any longer like it used to be under the old system. You go to Trenton, you get the local finance board, which was like a group of political cronies, to say, hey, go ahead and raise the property taxes, no problem. They granted 95% of the waivers that were asked for. They're out of that business now because of the legislation we passed in July. And now the only people who can approve a property tax increase higher than the cap are the voters. If your town, your school board wants to raise your taxes higher than a 2% increase, they got to put it on the ballot and you get to vote for it. What this is going to force now is for school districts and municipalities to have to make hard choices. We're going to have to share services. That's, I think, where it's going to start. We're going to have to share administrators. And in the new superintendent pay bill cap that we put into effect, that caps superintendent pay at no higher than the salary of the government. Because, you know, I figure they have tough jobs as superintendent of schools, but it can't be tougher than this. Right? So I think at $175,000, the reason should be okay. In that bill, it also rewards them, it allows them to make more money if they're superintendents for more than one district at a time. So you can share administrators in some of these smaller districts. What we're trying to do is by imposing fiscal discipline, making people make those hard choices at the local level where I think you can make them the best. I don't want some well-meaning employees in the Department of Education to decide that Woodbridge and Old Bridge should merge. I don't know if that's good or bad. I gotta tell you the truth, I never lived in either place. I don't know, and I'm sure the people in the DOE don't know, and so why should we make the decision? But I am confident in this, that the mayor of Old Bridge and the mayor of Woodbridge, that the heads of the school boards in those towns will be in a much better position to make that decision. And if they have fiscal discipline imposed upon them, they may have to make some of those choices. So I think you're going to see shared services in the beginning, and then ultimately consolidation because of the fiscal discipline that we're placing for the very first time on municipalities and school boards and counties. And that's the way I hope would lead to a reduction in those numbers. In the back there, lady, I think that looks pink, but I'm kind of looking into the light. Pink or purple? All right, pink.
Hi, I'm a teacher and a parent, and I really like the story of your mom teaching you that you need to work hard to achieve. And I wondered what the provisions are in your reform agenda for the students that don't have a parent or any adult telling them those things and pushing them that important education is important.
I acknowledge that that's one of the hardest parts. And I don't know that government can play that role. I don't know. But what I do know is this, that there are good teachers and good leaders inside schools that can help to supplement that role. They can't replace mom or dad, a role model at home, like my mother was to me. But by empowering teachers, we've seen in places like the Harlem Children's Zone, and Jeffrey Canada and the work that he's done there. He took one of the worst neighborhoods in America, and those children are now achieving extraordinary results in Harlem. Many of them with a single parent or no parent at all, because they focus differently on those children than some other ones. And so I can't tell you that in this plan, I have a solution for the parentless child. It's a heartbreaking thing. But I don't know that government can fix that by itself. I don't know whether it's not true that it really takes a number of different people to try to encourage that child and motivate that child. Other people in their lives, mentors from Boys and Girls Clubs and other volunteer organizations. There's going to be a whole collective group that's going to need to try to help make that child motivated. You put your finger on one of the most difficult issues, and I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I have an answer to it. So, you know, but it doesn't diminish this, okay? It doesn't diminish the fact that teachers need to be judged based upon the achievement of their kids. And that achievement is not just reach a number, because if you have a child who comes in and is below grade level, and you bring that child up significantly in that year, by more than a year's growth, but not quite to the next level, well then you deserve to be compensated for that. And I've heard Jeff Canada talk about how he does this in the Harlem Children's Zone, where he said, you know, if a teacher has a class that she inherits or he inherits that's at 85% of grade level, and when they finish the year, they're at 90% of grade level, some would say, well, geez, look at that class is 90% of grade level. That teacher deserves big money. He said, I have another teacher down the hall who inherits a class that's at 45% of grade level, and those kids graduated or finished that year at 75% of grade level. That teacher deserves more. It's below the 90%. But the movement that that teacher brought to that group of kids is much more significant than the 5% movement from 85 to 90. So when we talk about a system that has student achievement as a component, we're not talking about mindlessly testing to one level. We're talking about evaluating student progress. And teachers can do what they can do with what they are given. And as long as they're showing that kids are improving and improving at a rapid pace, they deserve the credit for that, and they deserve to be compensated, I would tell you, based in large part upon that kind of achievement. So it's all got to be relative compared to what you have. It can't be just to a number, because everybody's situated differently, like the child you're talking about, who comes in without necessarily a parental influence at home to say, have you done your homework yet? Did you read that extra half hour that your teacher asked you to read? Turn off the PS3 and the television set and pick up the book. I get it. I'm fighting that fight every day too. Okay? I'm fighting that fight. My 10-year-old son Patrick would play PS3 18 hours a day if I let him, and never read Tom Sawyer. Well, this summer the PS3 went off and he read Tom Sawyer because that's what he's going to do.
Yes, my name's Ed Grecki from Spotswood, New Jersey. I'd just like to applaud the work that you've already done and the work that you plan on doing. I have one question, kind of off the subject of the state of New Jersey, but something that affects me as a senior citizen and the rest of us, that disparity, and that is the federal government has taken away the what they call COLA, cost of living adjustment for the Social Security people, and then turned around and give themselves a raise. I'd like to know your opinion on that type of policy.
Yeah, well, listen, if you're going to get rid of COLAs, you got to get rid of COLAs. If the premise is that we can't afford COLAs out of the federal budget because we're in such deficit, which is a position that, you know, I understand, then federal employees shouldn't be getting COLAs either. I mean, so I think, again, this goes back to the concept I've been talking about all along as it applies to New Jersey. There has to be shared sacrifice. There can't be just one group being sheltered from the ravages of recession and have that shelter paid for by the very people who are being ravaged by the recession the most. So I understand you're upset about that, and I agree with you.
My question to you is not on this. I love what you're doing with the education. I was here last year before you were a nominee, and actually that was one of my questions for you. And you answered, I voted for you.
Thank you.
My question is actually on the RGGI. Is there any way, I know you guys hands full with the education system here, Have you thought about trying to get us out of what Horizon signed us into?
Well, listen, RGGI, for those of you who don't know, is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is this concept that regionally, this northeastern region should come together to try to reduce greenhouse gases in order to try to have an effect on global warming. Here's the thing. My concern about Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is that Pennsylvania isn't in it. So, we know that programs like RGGI increase the cost of doing business in the state of New Jersey. Now, if we're all in it, I'm not even sure I agree with it, but let's say for the sake of argument that I agree with it, okay? If we're all in it, then that's one thing. But when we have the state of Pennsylvania who said, count us out, that lowers the cost of doing business in Pennsylvania, the state we're competing with for private sector jobs, and that hurts New Jerseyans. And so my concern about RGGI is that it is not truly a regional greenhouse gas initiative. It's a partial regional greenhouse gas initiative. I can't believe I said that like 5 times, but without stumbling over it until the end. So my concern about it, and the thing we're looking at, I've asked the BPU to look at, or the folks at the Board of Public Utilities who oversees our participation in it, is to give an evaluation to me as to the anti-competitive nature of this and how it's affecting New Jersey businesses. And I'm going to make the evaluation of our continued participation in it based in large part upon just how anti-competitive it is and how much it's hurting the private sector and keeping our unemployment rate artificially high.
What about us?
What do you mean, what about you?
Our costs have gone up.
Of course, I mean, I'm talking about competitiveness in every sense. Okay, it's about creating private sector jobs. It's about people being able to afford their electric bills. That affects competitiveness because if their costs are too much, they leave. They leave and they go someplace else where they can afford to live. So that's what I mean by competitiveness: competing for brains to stay in New Jersey and competing for jobs to be in New Jersey. So that's the evaluation that President Solomon of the Board of Public Utilities is making for me. And then once we have a report and a position on that, you can bet that I'll be in a town hall like this, making it public and having a discussion about it.
Thank you.
This gentleman over here